Well, welcome to our first podcast, Dollars and Cents, with Krish and Manpreet. Today we are going to talk about who we are, what makes us in our respective fields professionals. What do we do and how do we get there? So, Manpreet, if I can start with you from your side of things and your story and your background. So, you're a financial planner. You run a company called BANGA Financial. Tell me a bit more about your story, about how you became a financial advisor and what led you to the path you are currently at.
Yeah, sure, Krish. So way before I actually wanted to become a financial planner, I actually thought I wanted to do law. So probably around year 10, I picked my subjects for the HSC to base it around being a lawyer. And I think a lot of that was to do with like the TV shows that we see, and like they glorify being a lawyer, and I wanted to be a criminal lawyer on top of that. So I went through HSC, doing legal studies and all of that sort of stuff, and then I got into university, got into law, but I also did a double degree, which was law was one degree, and then Bachelor of Commerce, Applied Finance was the other degree. At the start, I did work in law, not in criminal law, but I did work in law. And then ultimately, after working in law for a couple of years, I thought to myself, this is not what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to be older, like in my 40s or so, changing a career. I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's just the way I felt back then, that I didn't want to change careers when I was older. Now, when you are older, it actually isn't the worst case scenario to be changing careers. People do it all the time. But when you're younger, you don't always realise that, do you? So eventually I left law, got my first job with a super fund working in the back office. And then from there, I saw what financial planners actually did. I really liked it. I've always liked being around numbers and that sort of stuff. Being able to work with numbers and getting a great result for clients just made perfect sense. So I really like what financial planners did. So that's where my love for financial planning started. And then over time, I've worked for a large super fund, moved to a small boutique firm, and then eventually I thought to myself, you know what, I want to actually own my own business on top of being a financial planner. So it was a new challenge for me. And that's ultimately why I started BANGA Financial, is because I wanted to still have a financial planning business, be a financial planner, but also wanted to have my own business on top of that. So that's a bit of background of why I ended up in financial planning. Like I did also think about banking and that sort of stuff, but those things didn't interest me as much as financial planning did.
Yeah, perfect. That's a pretty interesting story. You went from a lawyer effectively all the way to a different concept altogether into financial planning. Although, obviously, we know compliance is a very big thing in financial advising. So that kind of goes hand in hand through your background and what makes you a great financial advisor in that sense. Okay, so we know the process that you went through from your earlier days in high school to university to now where you are currently. So explain to me your type of servicing that you provide to your clients that normally come to you. What is it that you normally see as being the biggest, or not the biggest, but the scope of advice that you probably provide to your clients?
So all of my clients want help with wealth building. So that can obviously take different forms, and we will talk about that down the track, but that is the biggest thing that I see with my clients is wealth building. How do we get there? Some people want help with tax strategies. So it's not just like so much how do I reduce my tax, but how do I effectively manage the amount of tax I pay through investment vehicles. It can be personal insurance, so life insurance, disability insurance, income protection. So it's a whole vast of different type of services that we provide. And then what I do at BANGA Financial is is provide holistic advice. What that means is that we cover all of these topics in the advice. So we're not saying that we're only going to give you advice on one topic. It's all these topics because they all come hand in hand. As you know, they all come in hand, and effectively you need a good strategy. So that involves an overview of your whole situation.
Yeah. Okay, that's very good. Holistic advice, I think, is paramount to people seeking advice as opposed to having a very tunnel-focused perspective, obviously, for clients and future wealth building. Which is financial planning. It is a very big scope, and the complexities, as you said, later down the track, we'll be talking about those type of things into each individual things. But the complexity of a financer and whether it's an individual or a household, and what the planning is. Like, right now we're talking about interest rates, the household expenses. There's so much financial turmoil, if I could call it that way, out there in the market. There's making a lot of people edgy in the current market. And that's where the great financial advice and planning really comes into play, where, if you know where you are currently and where you're actually going towards, and you've got a strategy in place, through a financial advisor like yourself, it really helps those type of clients, navigate the ups and downs of life. Life is all about excitement and the unknown, right? So the more you plan around it, the more segue you have to move a bit more flexibility with sort of things, because you're already kind of planning that way, which obviously for your clients is what they're looking for that purpose. So that's very good to see that holistic advice is where it's at. Okay, going away from financial planning. Now, tell me a bit more about your personal side of things. Are you're married with 2 kids, and your background? So I know a little bit about yourself, or not a little bit. I know a lot about you. But for the listeners out there, tell a bit more about your personal side of things.
Yeah, sure. So background is Indian, so North Indian, so Punjabi to be precise. But I was born in Australia. So I was actually born out in the Macarthur region, still live in the Macarthur region. There was a couple of years there where I moved into Canberra for work. But apart from that, I've always lived in the Macarthur region. And ultimately, as you mentioned, I've got a wife, 2 kids. Kids are 4.5 and 2.5. As you know, Krish, they take a lot of time. The kids, not the wife, but the kids. They can be a handful, but they're great most of the time. So that's where a lot of my time is spent, just spending time with kids and that sort of stuff. Now, previously, before having kids, I used to play a lot of sport with clubs. So I've always played some sort of sport as a kid, whether it's soccer, cricket, basketball, AFL, and then even through uni as I got older. Still played sport, but effectively that's died down because my main focus now is spending time with my kids, and then if they want to play sport, then just spending time with them, taking them around. So my son has shown some interest. Mm-hmm. The Cricket World Cup just ended. Unfortunately, India lost, but it's actually good they lost to Australia. So either way, it was a win-win for us. So,
yeah, no, exactly.
Because he actually asked me yesterday. He goes, "Oh, where's the cricket?" And then I had to tell him that it finished. But it was 6 weeks of just cricket, and then all of a sudden for him it's stopped, and that was the thing that we watched just before bed. And then ultimately it stopped. So he doesn't obviously understand why it stopped, but he was a bit sad that there was no cricket before bedtime.
Yeah, that's the bedtime story for kids these days, cricket. Everyone connects over cricket or sport. That's amazing. We can let them know that the test match is about to start. The Boxing Day test match you can look forward to. Okay, well that's pretty good to see that not only are you a individual that obviously takes care of others and their financial needs, but there is a person behind you. Not just a name, not just a company. There is humanity behind you. And obviously when you start seeing a family man, like I connect a lot with fathers myself, because obviously being a father like myself as well, you can really see the struggles we go through, and to be on top of that where you've got 2 young kids at the moment, obviously they need a lot of your time and attention. You've also got a business that you're taking care of, but most importantly, you've also got a whole bunch of clients that you're going to look after as well. And to be able to juggle all that, how are you finding the juggling scene between the personal life where a father comes into the picture, as well as the professional life where a advisor, my most trusted advisor that looks after my most important aspect of my life, which is obviously finance, one of the main top three causes of stress in individuals' life. Finance is in that top three. So how do you juggle between the needs of both sides of the equation?
Yeah, so for me, the first thing is family. So that's the most important thing for me. But obviously, you need a job to earn income and that sort of stuff, particularly at the start. So you do need that. So the way I juggle it, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. I mean, that's a very broad answer. I appreciate that, but ultimately it's time management. So for me, and I know this won't work for everyone, but for me, a big part of it is planning ahead. So like you still need to be flexible, but if you can plan ahead as much as you can, whether that's your day that's coming up, work that you have from clients, have a reasonable expectation. Like if I say new client today, Christmas is only a few weeks away. Is it going to be realistic to say, yes, I'll have that advice before Christmas? Some of it actually isn't reasonable to say that. So you say, look, more than happy to take on your work, but the truth is that you probably get the end result next year because of X, Y, and Z. And most people are fine. I find when you try to cram in too much and you've promised very highly, and then you might not be able to fulfill those promises, that's where the issue's coming, and that's when you take away time from family and that sort of stuff. And that's where I see basically like in terms of stress levels go up and that sort of stuff. So the thing that helps me is forward planning, even though so like if I know I have an event on like Thursday, for example, so we're doing this podcast today, I knew this was going to be happening today, so I planned ahead and made sure I had finished some things prior to us doing this podcast today.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Manpreet, about explaining the process and what got you to where you are right now, which is obviously a very astute financial advisor. Your process has shown, the decisions that we make early on doesn't necessarily mean it shapes your future forever. You have the flexibility of turning things around. But what it means is if you have a good plan in place, it allows you to have that flexibility more so. Because at the end of the day, you've got a starting point and an end point. And how do we get to the end point is the decisions that we make in between those 2 points. And those decisions that we make is obviously based on planning. So financial advice obviously is quite critical to everyone's future, because if we know what we want to go towards and we know where we are today, which is the starting point, the day zero, and our goal is X, Y, Z in A, B, C time period, then that's where the financial planning from your side of things really comes into the picture, because then you can really show your clients the path to go down towards in order to achieve those goals. And that's what financial planning is all about. From my understanding, it's all about the goals-driven advice, the scope that goes towards that, not only through wealth creation, but also wealth protection. You touched point on insurances, personal insurances to be more specific, and how critical those things are. And we'll obviously be going through this nitty-gritty stuff later on in our podcast into detail, but it really shows the listeners out there that financial planning is something that everyone needs to do. It is one of the big stresses in life. It is, you open up media, doesn't matter what type of media form you use, there is always about something negative around the impact on households, household finances to be more specific. So it's very good and refreshing to see someone coming through actually an educated background, right, a degree focused, not only in financial planning, but also applied finance to be more specific, but also in law. And having those two mixture come through into financial advising really shows your depth of knowledge that you will be able to provide your clients. And thank you for sharing your story with us today. I'm hoping the listeners and I actually got a lot out of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Krish.